will agree that several years ago, I remember 1988, I was at the secondary school then, when we heard that there was a proposal to decentralize governance, to make people be part of the decision-making process. So it was going to be participatory. I quite remember some of the songs at that time, but this was building up public interest. And soon after that, 4 years on, we saw the birth of the 1992 Constitution. And since then, what we know today as District Assembly concept has been with us. Today we hear MMDCEs, MMDCEs, and so on and so forth. So these MMDAs, that is the Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies, we understand how they should be operating. And so the typical idea is that there will be what we call the unit committee, there will be the town councils, there will be the assemblymen, and even the assemblymen, if you go to the district assembly, we have government appointees and those who are elected. I'll share with you in the course of this program the thought behind making the discussions at the assembly level apolitical. But today, as we speak, the district assemblies we know are heavily politicized. It is in breach of the EC regulations and the act that is supposed to establish the assemblies and to see for the completion of the electoral processes of those who occupy our assemblies. But they proudly denounce their interest, which is wrong. Again, our assembly system has been heavily influenced by money. And so it is the highest bidder who eventually gets there. And again, it is heavily polarized. And so you go to the assemblies and you see anger. I'll be sharing a few videos in recent past, but these issues I'm raising didn't start today. It started several years ago and it has been building on. I remember when former President John Agyekum Kufuor in his second term wanted his choice of nominees to become assembly members to be confirmed. At certain times, a whole block of government appointees were changed for new ones, and it started building up. So today we want to find out, do you agree with me that our district assembly concept is virtually collapsing and may get to a point where it will be very difficult to amend things? That is supposed to be our conversation today. And of course, we'll be hearing your thoughts along the line. And this evening, I'll be doing this conversation with somebody who has seen it all. I use this term very often because this man has been an assembly member before. He has been a presiding member before. I know he's a lecturer at the Ghana Maritime University. And of course, he's also the president of the Chamber of Local Government. And his name is Dr. Richard Fiadomo. He's with me here in the studio this evening. Doc, good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all your cherished viewers.
Good. You don't look very happy this evening. What is your problem?
Oh, I'm very happy. Just that we've had a long day. So
the stress.
The stress, yes.
I can imagine. At a point, I wanted to take a nap, but I told myself it will weigh me. So let me try to stay on and then have this conversation. Now, we are looking at the district assembly concept, and the topic is rethinking Ghana's decentralization. I carefully chose this topic because things appear to be going out of what would have been the normal thing that should drive our conversation in terms of looking at governance and democracy. From where you sit and working with the chamber, which has played a watchdog role on how we are handling ourselves at the various districts, what are some of the key concerns you have observed over the period?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like you rightly said, since 1988, we have gone through a certain journey, and today we are where we are. And I think that those who envisioned the local governance, Professor Kwame Nkrumah and co, knew exactly what they wanted the structures to be like. And if you look at Act 936, the structures are very clear. And I heard you talk about politicization and monetization and all that. Those things do not take center stage when the assembly meets or on the floor of the house. So sometimes certain things happen outside of the assembly, and people think that because of that, that is what. There's nobody at the assembly today who is there on the ticket of any political party. The fact that I may be an NDC secretary, MPP secretary, CPP secretary, known, and I go to contest election at an electoral area, and the people within the electoral area deem it fit that I'm the most appropriate person to represent them within a certain time frame. Yes, they are voting for me because they think that I have certain competencies to be able to, as it were, help the electoral area to grow. So the fact that my political affiliation is known doesn't necessarily mean that that is what, when you go on the floor of the House, you do. So clearly, yes, sometimes when it fits the politicians, they want to create the impression as if the assembly itself is politicized. It is not. If you have a situation whereby you have government trying to interfere, then that is what we should talk about. But if the government has not interfered, or government did not interfere, the structures will have been...
And that is where the problem starts. Because it is for a particular reason that if you look at Section 6 of the Act that establishes the Assembly and the role the EC must play in ensuring that these influences don't dominate the structure of the Assembly in terms of the people who form the Assembly, you'd realize that there are some specific issues they have raised. One talks about no person shall mount a platform or cause a platform to be mounted in the name of a political party. One talks about a person who contravenes, and it goes on and on and on. I'll share these details. And so the preamble is that the assembly concept at that time was supposed to be apolitical. Today, you have the NDC members who are perceived to be sabotaging government nominees, and tomorrow you have government nominees who are trying to frustrate known NDC members. That is the reality, and that is the deviation people want us to depart from.
Yeah, the issue is that if you look at Article 2431 of Ghana's Constitution, it is clear. The president just has the power to nominate somebody. And once the nomination is done, the president is done with his or her job. Now, it is now incumbent on the assembly members to go ahead and confirm the president's nominee. So, obviously, if there is nobody today, as I know it, in any of the 260, today is 261 because the Guan district has also been inaugurated. Yes, added. Clearly, it is just a perception. So for you to know that me sitting down here, I'm an NDC member, MPP member, CPP member, and I'm an assembly member, that is your thought and impression about me. It doesn't mean that when I'm on the floor of the House and I'm supposed to vote for a president nominee, I take my political affiliation into consideration. And that's why we have always said that if you go to any typical General Assembly, they are standing orders that is followed, and we have a model standing order for the Assembly. So you don't see anywhere in our the modern standing orders where you see anything that even has any political inclination or political undertone. So let's our biases should not be foisted on the assemblies for you to say that the president's nominee, if the assembly members, for Christ's sake, they are adults, if they feel that the person the president has nominated is not fit for purpose or doesn't have what it takes to do the work, who says they do not have the right to reject that person?
Now, I want us to break down this conversation because we have spoken to a number of people. We have done some few research. We have information about things that have happened in other parts of the country as far as the district assembly and what they should do is concerned. Now, I want to share with you the summary of some of the concerns that we put together. Now, one of the concerns is the current assembly concept is heavily politicized and polarized, full of suspicion and acrimony. And for those who are joining us, this is Ideas Exchange, and the program is on TVXYZ. It starts every Wednesday from 8 to 9 o'clock. The present power of the president to appoint MMDCEs and 1/3 of each assembly is undemocratic and distorts the concept of decentralization. there's another concern. Non-payment of assembly members make them vulnerable, a recipe for manipulation and corruption. Again, it says the agenda to recruit MPs, that's a recruit MPs interested, and of course, this is a typo, agenda to recruit MPs interested in contesting parliamentary seats fuels conflict of interest. I think what it should be is the agenda to recruit MMDCs, appointees who may be confirmed, who may have an interest in a parliamentary seat, fuels conflict of interest. Non-functional role of MPs makes them inefficient, especially for parties in opposition. Apathy among members, larger section of the public reflecting in low turnout during election. So the apathy also affects the role of the assemblies. Late, the Assembly Common Fund releases and a formula for disbursing the fund which doesn't favor communities in deprived areas. Now, this is a summary of the research we have done and the conversation we have had from people we have spoken to, some of which we'll share on this program. As an assembly member who went to be a presiding member, I think it's a Tema Metropolitan Assembly, and a lecturer, somebody who is the president of a civil society organization which is into local assemblies and governance issues. Do you find this summary right or questionable?
Yeah, I agree with some I do not agree. Now, when you say that the assemblies are heavily politicized and polarized, what do you mean? The assembly members, they are politicians. The difference between they and the normal politicians we see, those in parliament and indeed in government, is that the assembly members are not partisan politicians. Okay? So if you say that it is politicized, yes, they are politicians. They went through universal adult suffrage to become assembly members. They had to go to people to campaign. And that when I come, I'll be able to bring development to this particular electoral area. It's on the basis of that they are voted into power. So it is politics. What is not is partisan politics. So,
I don't understand. What does that mean?
Yeah, partisan politics is when you are doing representing political parties. NDC, MPP, CPP, PNC. That is partisan politics. But the assembly, as you rightly read, you are not even allowed to use any particular political party's colors for your posters. If the EC sees that, they can disqualify you.
Are you suggesting to me that the known MPP or NDC or CPP or whichever political party may end up as an assemblyman goes there with a mindset thinking about the development of the assembly rather than the parochial interest of his or her political party?
No, you see, if you go to parliament, today there are two
175.
Yes, NDC is there, MPP is there. But when you come to the assembly, so the assembly members sit together in a meeting. You do not have a situation where we say that these people should sit it or to the left and these people should sit to the right. You see, that is where sometimes we have a difficulty. Me being MPP, CPP, or PNC member, that is not what I used to go to the assembly. That is why the law does not even require me to use colors of my political party. So the fact that I'm a branch executive or polling station executive or I'm a constituency executive member for a particular party doesn't mean that is what sent me to the assembly. I went to people and told them that if you give me the opportunity, I'll do ABCD for this electoral area to make sure that the electoral area grows and also develops. So now, that is the basis for which people are elected.
That is supposed to be the norm. Because if you look at Section 4 of the Act that is supposed to establish the functioning of the various assemblies, you'd realize that it is very categorical in who should stand and what they should do. And I'm making reference to Act 473 of the District Assembly Elections Act 1994. And it is clearly spelling out what you have said. But you would also agree that what happens on the ground is totally different from the picture you are painting. And so if the assemblies must function efficiently, there must be a deviation from what you are suggesting. And that is what we want to look at, a way we can break out from what we are observing today.
I see we live in a country where it appears politicians do no wrong. When the political parties decide to misbehave, they know that they are not supposed to be involved in the assembly process. And that is why if you look at 55(3) of the Ghana's constitution, it is clear that political parties are not supposed to be part of the local governance system. And that is why not too long ago the president wanted to amend Article 55(3) of Ghana's constitution to allow political parties to, and it's also for good reasons that the framers of Ghana's constitution made Article 55(3) an entrenched clause. So if we are going for assembly election and the NDC, MPP, CPP decide to go and meet somewhere and select somebody they think should represent the electoral area, that is their problem.
It is not their problem. It is Ghana's problem. Let me explain to you why. I am sure, and let's use the recent development to reflect what has happened over the years. There's always the issue of campaign, and that campaign is supposed to be done by politicians using money to influence assembly members, and those who go and subject themselves to the campaign process come to do what must satisfy the expectation of those bidders. Are you suggesting to me that it is different from the perception and what is happening on the ground? We saw people fighting, and these confusions always give us the picture about what must not be the reflection of the assembly concept.
Yeah, so you see, what is happening is that the assembly members have a mandate, and they are the people's representative. So when the president nominates somebody for confirmation, that person is not going for a contest. So assembly members, for Christ's sake, they are not delegates.
While we are having this conversation, I would want you to make an observation of some videos we have put together.
Sure.
These videos are incidents that happened. One at Odododiodo, one in your neighborhood, Tema, one at Shreponi, one in Cape Coast, and I believe another one in another part of the country, which will be shown on the screen. Now, what you see on the screen is Odododiodo. These are political party activists who are not happy with the nomination of a candidate to go and represent the Accra Metropolitan Assembly. Now, this is similar to what happened at Shreponi. Now, if you go to Cape Coast, you have the regional minister who virtually went on her knees begging assembly members to endorse a candidate. Then we have another set of assembly members who were identified as NDC members of the assembly who came to say, we are not taking the money. Now, the picture you are painting is that money is not playing a role, politics is not playing a role. So how come we have so much polarization to the extent that in Takwa recently, you remember that there was almost a fight because one set of assembly members were not being allowed to go and perform their functions. This is the picture on the ground.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, we need to separate the two. These videos we are seeing, the president has nominated somebody, and the president is an MPP member. The person the president has nominated is also MPP. But when we issue about nomination of MMDC, it's the power of the president, and indeed the prerogative of the president to appoint, and it has to be somebody. So obviously, other people's supporters will not be happy, but this one, they are not members of the assembly.
So you are suggesting that this assembly we have today has no problem?
Yes.
And therefore, there is no issue at hand that must be considered to look at the better approach to ensuring that they are delivering on their mandates. That's the impression you are creating.
That is what is the situation is, because if you look at Act 936, it tells us what the local governance system should be like and what assembly members and indeed all who are members of the assembly should do. So when things happen outside of the assembly and we want to force those actions on the assembly, then we are getting it wrong. So if the president makes a nomination and a group of people go to town and go to misbehave because they do not like the person the president has nominated and they want somebody else, that is not the assembly. it is because they feel that their person, if he or she gets the chance and he counts, maybe he will do something for them, fine. But that is not part of the assembly. That's why when the president nominates, that is the end of the story. The president does not control what happens on the floor of the house. That's why we see some of the president nominees being rejected, and you have a regional minister who, I'm sorry to say, doesn't know what she's about, to go down kneeling and begging. Why do you do that? Because assembly members have a mandate. So it is their duty to vote. So how they vote should not be for public consumption. It is also universal adult suffrage, and it's election by secret balloting. Okay. But for a minister to go begging, I think that we don't want to be too hard on her. She's confused and she doesn't know how the local government system works. Unfortunately, okay, so she has been made a
what
minister.
You are suggesting creates the impression that the district assembly concept that was conceived as far back as 1988, which came into effect after the 1992 Constitution, and what we have seen over the years is still perfect, and therefore we cannot address the issues that should be looked at. I want us to hear the views of Engineer Isaka Amonkote. He's an entrepreneur. He has a strong business development, professional skills, a master of public administration, and of course his focus is on local governance. He's experienced in safety management systems and an environment auditor. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
I'm sure you have listened to excerpts of the conversation. Now, our topic is to look at the decentralization concept, the threats, i.e. politicization of issues that involve the election processes and the mandate they have, monetization that is appearing to be influencing what happens on the ground, and the detachment of the assembly members from the ordinary Ghanaians who must be part of the decision-making processes. And so at this stage, we want to find out the critical issues of concern and what we can consider as solutions that the stakeholders in policy formulation would have to look at. We want to hear your take on this.
Okay. You see, our concept here is more or less a non-partisan approach to local government. You know, we have different types of models all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
In our part of the world, the concept is non-partisan. But as we all know, central governments all over the world have the tendency of centralizing instead of decentralizing. So normally it is the people who must fight for decentralization. It appears that political parties that gain power always consider the local government as some kind of a booty that they have acquired after elections. So they should share among themselves. And if we have that behind you know, the minds of stakeholders, then the whole concept becomes jaundiced, you know. Yes, the clear functions of an MCE is to represent central government, supervise departments of the assembly, see to the day-to-day administration, and then chair executive committee. Okay, so the president is supposed to do the nomination. If you look at the previous standing orders, there was this bit of at the assembly forming an ad hoc committee to vet the nominee.
Right.
That bit, no government has allowed that process to take place during nomination and accepting or rejecting
the MMDCs.
The nominee. So we seem to have corrupted the whole concept, and we are moving with it. So people are talking about election of MMDCs. What form is it going to take? I keep asking, what is the blueprint guidance so we can say, okay, let's go of it? Because we have the system where political parties will come out with, let's say, 3 or 4 people, and then the people will go and vote for that person. Or it's an open adult suffrage, something that individuals can even file. Political parties can also file for their members. How is the whole thing going to look like? Because before you move into a new model in local government, we have to consider so many things. First, the historical antecedent of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't create in the future, we don't see ourselves moving into federal states. We have to be careful in this direction. So as we speak now, yes, a lot of people are blaming the assembly members for collecting money here and there. I am not sure whether that is right anyway, or because Cape Coast, for instance, has taught us how some assembly members brought the money back. So it is somehow in the open, and I don't know how we can clean all this up.
Is it a hopeless situation? Because I am in the studio with Dr. Richard Fiadomo. He's the president of Chalog. He thinks that it is not as worse as many people who are worried today are thinking.
The collection of money?
No, the way we see our assemblies today, where politics and money appear to have dominated the orientation of those there, which is heavily polarizing the members and how they operate.
Okay. You see, yes, one can say it is not alarming. But if you look at, or if you want to consider the functions of the assembly itself and the way we are going, one will conclude that we have a problem. For instance, under NPP3, Nanabi created 4 major ministries, which have the functions of district assembly, the local government. All the functions are local government functions. All their functions. One, the Ministry of Sanitation. Mm-hmm. The Ministry of Zongo Development. The third one, Special Initiative. All their functions are local government functions. And we allow them to compete with the local government. And then in this current NPP4, he has collapsed 3 and then left Sanitation Ministry to run. Meanwhile, the Sanitation Ministry, all their functions are local government functions. So, the central government itself is not helping it matters. And then if you want to look at let's consider the output of the district assemblies in these 4 years. Finance, the law says that, or the act says that we should take not less than 5% of the common fund share among the district assemblies.
Yeah,
when the NPP came, the threshold was 7.5. And then they reduced it to 5%.
Yes.
You see, they have weakened the assemblies already.
Yeah, that was capped. But Doc, sorry, engineer, I'll come back to you. But because we are in the studio with Dr. Richard Fiadomo, I want him to make some comment on the proposition you are making. Then we can come back to you. So stay with us on the line. Don't cut the line. He's raised some quite interesting points. Especially, he's coming to one other aspect of the conversation, which has to do how government, central government, appears to be manipulating the various assemblies, depriving them of how they should be able to function. They're supposed to take care of sanitation, some development projects, pass their own laws, and of course, think with their people to look at what their needs are. For example, markets. But in many of the assemblies, they don't have the capacity to do some of these things. And Doc was going towards that area. What do you make of some of the comments he has made?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I agree with him that this particular government, when you look at their local government policy, it has not been too clear-cut. And that is why we saw what we saw in Nana Addo's first term, and I think upon pressure, he has now reduced it. So clearly, at a point, the local government ministry was being even competed with by other ministries that were taken out, and those are clear functions of the local government ministry and authority. So at the end of the day, it also weakened the assembly. There is this development authorities, coastal belt, middle belt, and all those things. All those things coming in is defeating the issue of decentralization, because you have now moved the powers back to the center, and when this thing happens, it's affecting local governance in this country. So yes, I agree with him 100% on that score. And now the issue about government, successive government, trying to, as it were, have influence is also because of how sometimes the chief executives are selected. Now, if you look at the process, it is also done on a partisan basis, to the extent that it is the party chairman and indeed those within the constituency that even start the processes of even nominating people to go through the vetting process to become MMDC. So at the end of the day, the party at the constituency level thinks that they have a foothold on whoever becomes the MCE, and at the end of the day, everything that they want done has to be done by whoever has been. But what also happens is that the president, in doing consultation to nominate MMDCs, does not consult assembly members.
Okay, that's a fine point. But engineer, let me come to you. What do you recommend would be the best approach to reduce the tension, the suspicion, and of course to give that political will at the local level for the various MMDAs to operate efficiently?
You see, the concept from where from the studies I have made, you see, the central government must, in a way, manage the process of selection. You see, and then PP3, they gave the consultation. They started from constituency level and then push it up to the regional level and then national and then to the office of the president. This time around, they cut off the constituency, move it to the region, and then from the region to national, and then the president's office and whatever has come out. Now, it's a public office. So why can't the presidency consult the Public Services Commission, for instance, to assist in choosing or selecting the MMDCs? Why? Why haven't we tried that aspect?
Is it not going to be complicated? Because if you look at what is happening...
Government services itself. Why haven't we tried that?
But I'm sure you are also aware that the political party activists will say, look, we fought hard, and anybody who was not part of the struggle cannot just come and enjoy the booty.
No. You see where the problem is. It's not part of what struggle. You need somebody. You see, the functions, 88 functions of the district assemblies, there's nowhere partisan politics is involved. If you look at health, you look at security, you look at economic, socio-economic development, you look at generating of funds, you look at education. Where are we getting the partisan politics in it? Where? Because in the constituency, you have a constituency chairman and his executives. And we have an administrative body which, by the functions, the MCE represents central government. So does that turn the whole thing into a partisan politics enclave? No. You see, so I am looking at a situation where an MCE will come up with a vision loaded with some strategic plan for his district. In this situation, If you ask any MC what is the economic strength of his district, he can't tell you.
And are you suggesting that?
Why do we want to mingle the whole thing with partisan politics, and then when the system fails, then we say because we did not allow the system we didn't allow the people to vote or to vote on partisan basis. That is why the assemblies are struggling. No.
Okay.
From January to date, we have not sent even 2 cities to any of the district assemblies.
Yeah, we understand the old 3 quarters. But engineer, if you wouldn't mind, let me come to the studio briefly. I'll come back to you to make your concluding remarks. But Doc raises some interesting points. We know that assembly members are not paid. They live on allowances. And I mentioned corruption as, I mentioned this as a recipe for corruption because some may use it to influence them, to get projects here and there, or they lobby for contractors and get their kickbacks, which may not necessarily be the reason why they are doing so, but they must survive. We also know that the District Assembly Common Fund, even though the law says that it must go quarterly, it is at the pleasure of central government, which is almost like what we witnessed in the early 70s, early 80s, where the central government was doing virtually everything. The question is there a way we can break away from some of the critical concerns Engineer Amonkote has raised, for example? Doc.
Yeah, thank you. As for the local governance system now, it's just like somebody selling a cow to you and still holding on to the tail.
What does it mean?
The central government, instead of doing proper devolution to go down in terms of fiscal policy, in terms of administrative, they do not want to do that. And meanwhile, if you look at night races, the structures are very clear. To the extent that now he was trying to say, if government, you do not release the common fund, the assemblies cannot be able to undertake development projects. Then you, the same government, you turn around and say that because the election was not done on partisan basis, that is why development is not taking place. If it's done on partisan basis, the common fund will it be released in a very timeous manner. So we have a situation whereby we have a group of people sitting down there in central government. They know that the local government system is there. We have a head of local government service and all that, but they are not allowing the structures to work. So if for the 2020 third quarter was the last time common fund was released, 1 year down the line.
Now, if it was the other way round, where some proponents are saying that, look, the whole thing, we must agree that it's politics all over, and let's open up and allow people to elect MMDCs. Could the situation have turned?
No, if you say we should elect MMDCs on non-partisan basis.
On partisan basis?
Yeah, it's just a waste of everybody's time. Because you see, this issue of partisan basis, what is the difference? I mean, what have we seen partisan politicians do that the non-partisan politicians? You see, look, when you see our parliamentarians, they are lawmakers. If you look at the assembly members, they are also policy or lawmakers at the local level. But what are we seeing? The parliamentarians have smuggled MP's common fund. Meanwhile, it is the assembly members and indeed the chief executive, they are the development agents. MPs are not development agents.
It's an interesting point. I'll come to you because Doc would have to go away along the line. So, Doc, if you look at what, Engineer Kota, if you look at what Doctor is suggesting, it appears as if we may have to go back to the books and review the whole district assembly concept to ensure that the assembly become more efficient because they are the agents of change at the local level.
Hello?
Yeah, Doc, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. It's very interesting. You see, central government seeing the district assemblies, or for that matter, local government, as a boutique share is the first danger. Until they hear that and clean it from their books, that the district must have a district chief executive who will go there to perform the functions clearly. We are not going to go anywhere. Those who are pushing for elections, yes, I know a lot of people are pushing for elections, but they have not considered the historic antecedents of the country. We cannot think that we are going to give the mandate to a group of people in the region to elect their chief executives, and when they come together as an organized group of MMDCs in the region, I wonder if we have considered how strong these people are going to be. You know,
so they can sabotage central government. I get the drift, sir.
Hello?
I was saying, so they have the capacity to sabotage central government if they form.
Not necessarily sabotage. You see, the juicy part of all the taxes are collected from the central government. So if they come in one region, the MMDCs come together, they all have the mandate of their people. Do you know how strong they will look like?
I understand the impression you want us to appreciate.
Have we thought about it?
No.
Recently, there's an association called Association of Assembly Members. Now they are coming up with some demands. They say they want vehicles. They must be placed on Article 71. Even assembly members who are from various electoral areas are coming up with these demands. Now, when we have MMDCs who have been elected into office and they have the mandate of their people coming together with some demands, do we know where we will be getting into? We have to look at all this. If the people are rushing, let's elect, and they will account to the people. We are electing MPs. How are they accountable to the people? It's only after every 4 years, then we go and queue and vote for them. Even the president, how is he accountable to the people? So that argument, I don't see it.
Okay.
The issue at stake is central government must try as much as possible to do away with partisan politics, and then let's run the system how it was captured, the concept as it was captured, not the one that we have corrupted it with money, partisan politics, acrimony, and order. And we have a situation where assembly members are beaten for not voting for a particular MMDC and all that. Why do we have to go into that?
Engineer.
This is a simple concept. The president has the prerogative right to nominate one person. The assembly members also have their right to accept or reject the person. It is a fantastic model. Why don't we allow the people to do it? That's why I talk about the initial vetting process that we have taken off the books. You see, that vetting article that was in the standing orders, it was to allow assembly members to acquaint themselves with the nominee. Because they are going to work with the nominee.
And so they would have been able to take better decisions. So engineer.
At this stage, you either meet them in your bedroom, and then after eating some fufu or akre, then
that will influence you.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, engineer.
So when they meet again and they decide not to vote for you, whose fault is it?
The beatings will come. We appreciate your contribution this evening. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, so we will thank you very much for your very instructive contribution to the program Ideas Exchange. We believe that one day we should have you in the studio with us. Thank you very much. So, engineer makes some very good points. Now, we want to look at the way forward. We spoke to a section of the public, short tape, about 3 or 4 Ghanaians. I want us to listen to these Ghanaians, and then when we come to the studio, we'll ask you to help us with what you consider as solutions that government, parliament, or any influential body should be looking at, especially you people in governance institution who will be contributing largely towards the constitutional review process that we know should be starting in the coming weeks. Let's listen to them.
They've not called me for a meeting before, but I've met my assemblywoman. She really works. She's been organizing fufu on weekends for us to go and eat. Anything wrong in the area, we do report it to her because of what she gives us on weekend, the fufu. So we've been working hand in hand with her.
Really, it is not helping. It has failed as a nation because what we expect from them to help develop their communities, they are not doing it. They are not doing much as expected. Let me give one example. I live around Santa Maria, and there's another place called Antieku, which is closer to Santa Maria, in between Santa Maria and Soto. The district assembly is fixed there, or the office is there. And here's the case, the road to that place is very bad. When it rains, you can't even go through. Some of the gutters are being destroyed, which I expect the district assembly to fix them. But yes, still, and when it rains and you are using a small car, you can't go through.
Actually, I've stayed in the area for like 2 years. I've never seen my assemblyman before. I've not even heard of him having a communal labor or anything before. So actually, I don't know any unit committee member, and I don't know my assemblyman. Do they actually exist at all? Because I've been hearing of the name assemblyman, unit committee chairman, but I have never seen them before. I've never heard of them having a communal labor, because I know for assemblymen they can at least organize a communal labor or something once a month or twice in a month.
So this is Ideas Exchange on TVXY that will come your way on Wednesdays 8 to 9 o'clock. What is your own idea you want us to judge on? You can always send them to me on 020-866-7000. I'm here in the studio with Dr. What's the name? Fiadomo. What does it mean?
The king has
created the path.
Yeah.
Now, you listen to them. It's common knowledge that many people don't know their assembly members. It is also common knowledge that especially in the bigger towns and cities, assembly members are having a field day because they hardly meet their constituents. That is one of the reasons why perhaps we see apathy when it comes to the election of assembly members. How can this be fixed?
Yeah, thank you very much. The issue is very simple. The assembly members, as we see them, they are supposed to be policy makers at the assembly. They are supposed to be representing people at their electoral areas. But assembly members are not people who control resources. So if an assembly member wants a project done even in his or her electoral area, he now has to go and lobby the chief executive or indeed the assembly for that to be done. Now, if the chief executive is not keen or interested, and that's why you mentioned a point where you have a situation whereby some chief executive wants to be MPs. So because they want to be MPs, the area that they want to be MPs, they see to it that development goes there. So that one, it is not because of the assembly member that the development is going there.
What control, because you have been a presiding member before, the assembly is a miniature parliament. And so the presiding member listens to the debate on the floor. You prioritize what the assembly has identified as your needs, and then you advise or recommend to the DCE what must be done. How come DCEs who want to become MPs have the authority and that clout to be able to influence so many assembly members who brought that DCE to power? Why?
Yeah, they are not influencing the assembly members, but they control the resources at the assembly. So the chief executive, as you see them, They are the approving authority at the assembly.
But you know the vote of no confidence in there, and there are other laws or maybe bylaws that you know that once breached, you can trigger any of them and then act to put that DC back to order. You know this. It doesn't happen.
Do you know why the assembly members have been beaten? Because they are not confirming the president's nominee. We have a situation whereby we think that the assembly members are not people who should be able to think on their feet or take any decision on their own. Because once the president has brought somebody, anything you do to that person, then you are trying to disgrace the person.
And that is why, from your earlier submission, when you suggested that politics, monetization, and all those things people have identified to be the bane of the non-performance or the bane of the assemblies and what they should be doing now, you disagreed that that is not the picture on the ground.
Yeah, that's why that is not at the assembly. The political interference is not coming from the assembly. It is coming from outside of the assembly. The so-called monetization we are talking about is not coming from the assembly. It is not the assembly's resources that they are dishing out to the assembly members. It is somebody who has been named by the president who wants to be confirmed. He goes to meet assembly members somewhere and decides that, yes, the president has nominated me, I want people to confirm me. So when assembly members are going, they are giving envelopes. These are unsolicited monies. Now, for me, all these issues are sour grapes matter. All those who were confirmed and were giving 100% confirmation, who says they didn't give money? Did you hear anybody talk about money for those who were confirmed? It is rather those who were not confirmed who are now saying that they give monies to the assembly members. And I have always said that I have a lot of respect for assembly members who purportedly took money and didn't vote according to their money.
Now, how are things supposed to play out? I am a nominee. I go to my district. I use money to influence the people. I get 98%, 100%. Sometimes journalists are not allowed to come in. How is this likely to influence the functions of the assembly with the DC who knows very well that he has bought all of them and they will remain in his pocket?
Why are journalists not allowed to? General Assembly meetings are public meetings. So who prevented the journalists? It is not the assembly. So you have some regional ministers who are busily misbehaving and not allowing the local governance system to function.
You are sounding like very protective, a former assembly member, a former presiding member, and you don't want to accept what people see as an unusual happening which is getting to the extreme in this era. Because your narrative suggests that everything is okay.
I'm saying that the system and the structure is intact. The players are the ones that are creating the problem. And I've just told you that all General Assembly meetings are public meetings. Unless the presiding member and the assembly says they want to meet in committee. In electing or confirming MMDCs, there are special meetings, and those meetings cannot be held in committee. So for a journalist to be prevented from going to an assembly hall to, as it were, cover confirmation process, that can only come from the security agencies or indeed the regional ministers, and they are not part of the assembly. The impression I want to create is that we should not sit down and allow people who are not players at the assembly to create a scenario, and then that will be foisted on the assembly. That is what I do not want to accept. So if a meeting is public, and not only journalists, anybody at all can be in that meeting as far as the space can accommodate them, and somebody says that they shouldn't enter. Were we not in this country when Takwa, we had the regional minister use the Red Sec, the police, to prevent assembly members who are bona fide members of the assembly from going to cast their vote? That's one too. Is it the workings of the assembly? No. So all that I want to say is that the assembly members are bona fide members of the assembly and they have the right to vote. Assembly members do not need money to confirm a president nominee because it's a constitutionally mandated duty. So if an assembly member is not allowed to perform, recently, I think somewhere in the Ashanti region, out of 55, 33 were prevented from voting. Only 19 went to vote and they all voted yes. And that person has been confirmed because the Article 2431 says assembly members present and voting. So the regional minister sits down that there's some lacuna in there, and he takes advantage and just allow only 90 people to go and vote for the president nominee. Now 33 people were prevented from voting.
Imagine this happened at Tema Municipal Assembly, and 19 out of 54 went to endorse 100%. What is supposed to be the role of the majority assembly members who did not partake in the elections in observing the proceedings on the floor of your halls where you meet? What normally should be done?
Yeah, this one, there has been a mafia action taken.
But
right?
you know, nothing happens. They complain, and even though they have the powers to demonstrate that on the floor, they don't. And that is the problem we are looking at. And what do you suggest should be the best approach?
Yes, you see, recently, not too long ago, when the Tako assembly members were prevented from voting, they went to court. They lost the case in court, and they were also fined. So you see...
What does that mean?
Yes, that is travesty of justice as far as the local governance sector is concerned. Because I am an assembly member and have a constitutional right to vote. But I am prevented using force by the police. Yet I was fined. And that should tell you the extent to which the local governance system, even though the structures are there, the powers that be do not want to respect the structures.
And it summarizes the import of this conversation that things have gone worse and must be fixed. And if it must be fixed, solutions must be proffered in one word or in one sentence. What do you think lies ahead? And for which reason you think as Ghanaians we should be concerned and all drive our energies towards finding solutions?
Yeah, for me, what is happening actually is just that central government, when I say central government, successive government that have come, they do not want to fully implement our decentralization policy. And that is why the MPP is even worse in my view. To the extent that they come and they now come and say that they have put together a Middle Belt Development Authority, it means that, and they cap the common fund. And now money that are supposed to go to the assemblies for development has now been capped and moved to the development authorities that have been from Middle Belt, Northern Belt and all that. And that defeats the purpose of decentralization. And immediately you do that, now projects that are happening, you have a situation whereby central government even does projects within a certain assembly, and the assembly has little or no control over the project. Contracts are awarded from Accra using the assembly's own share of the common fund, and the assembly itself doesn't. So if you have a situation whereby you have people at the center not wanting the assemblies or the decentralization to work, that is a problem. So I think that if West comes to West, we should rather stop the decentralization and then be free. Let's go back to where we were.
Well, so I have been in the studio with Dr. Richard Fiadomo. He's a president of the Chamber of Local Government, and then also we know it's Charlotte. He's a lecturer at Maritime University, a former assemblyman and a presiding member. And also we spoke along the line to engineer Isaka Amonkote. He's an entrepreneur, he's a business development expert with masters in public administration with a preference to governance and local government issues. I don't know what your own thoughts are, but I believe that the conversation will not end here. But before we go, I want to say a special thank you to a few people who have done something special to us who were affected when licenses were taken by the National Communications Authority. I believe that at this stage, we all know that the NCA has begun the process to give our licenses back to us. Radio XYZ management is grateful to all Ghanaians, especially those who fought on the media front, speaking to conscience of the people to bring our licenses back. Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abrama, we thank you so much. The that's Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association, the Minority Caucus in Parliament, especially the Communications Committee of Parliament, Sam George, Samuel Okujetua Blakwa, Kennedy Japan. We are looking at the current chairman, Frederick Opareansa. We are looking at Fuseni, ABA Fuseni. And then, of course, we are looking at Dr. Reko Brobi, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, the leadership of the NDC, who consistently spoke to government and pleaded with government to give to us back our licenses. And, of course, the Kwesi Pratt, the Randy Abbas, and so on. We want to say thank you very much. We will succumb to all the recommendations and ensure that we get Radio XYZ back. And for those of you who have been with us, want to say thank you. Keep praying for Radio XYZ. Keep praying for management of XYZ Broadcasting, which owns TV XYZ and Power FM. We hope to meet you again next Wednesday for another edition of Ideas Exchange. Thanks to my producers, and I hope everything will stay with you. God bless all of you for being with us.